Aloha and welcome to Botany 101. I'm Angela Nishimoto, and today we're going to go further into the angiosperms. Okay, so we're going to be doing flowering plants and civilization. Okay, so we're going to start off talking about a plant called puccoon. Okay, puccoon is probably a Native American word, okay, for a plant that we know of as Lithospermum ruderale. Okay, now this is a flowering plant. Here you have a nice photograph of it. Okay, it has when the flower develops into a fruit, it has a very hard seed, so it's also known as stone seed in the areas to where they're native to, which are Nevada and California. Okay, so the thing about this plant is that the women, Shoshone women, drank an infusion of the root to induce permanent sterility. So after they drank infusions of the root over a course of several days or several weeks, they would render themselves permanently sterile, or so goes the talk. Okay, so here's a look at the flower. Here you can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 petals. So of course this is a dicot. You can see the hairs here on the leaves and also on the stem. Okay, nice close-up of puccoon. Okay, so a man named Cleland Ford was curious about the stories coming down, about the Shoshone women becoming sterile when they take an infusion of the root. So what he did is he experimentally fed it to female mice, okay? And he found, feeding them to female mice, it eliminated the estrus cycle, okay? So pretty much the reproductive lives of these mice were curtailed, okay? It decreased the weight of their ovaries, it decreased the weight of their thymus glands, it decreased their weight of their pituitary gland, okay? So what does this tell us? That the use of this plant had a basis in fact. Now it's not like that all the time, but it also shows that research is essential, okay, to investigate claims made by traditional peoples or indigenous peoples of different areas. Here's a nice photograph of another Lithospermum purpurocerium, okay. All right, so research is essential, right, to investigate plants that may have potential medical uses, as well as plants that may have other uses that may be useful to human beings, okay? So folk medicines did cure some diseases, okay, even though some didn't, but some did. Okay, so nowadays, botanists, like ethnobotanists, anthropologists, and also MDs or medical doctors, what they'll do is they'll interview medical practitioners from all backgrounds, from all over the world, in order to get to the bottom of uses of certain kinds of plants. Okay? That's kind of a lesson. So what we're going to talk about next is origin of cultivated plants. Okay? So we talked a little bit about a plant that was used for medical purposes, that was shown and demonstrated to be actually a true use of the plant. Okay, now we're going to talk about the origin of cultivated plants. So a Swiss botanist named Alphonse de Candolle in the 1880s published a book called The Origin of Cultivated Plants. Okay, so he was the first major botanist to investigate the origins of plants that we cultivate for food or for other purposes, for fiber, for other purposes. Okay, so according to de Candolle's theories, that these plants originated in areas with their wild relatives. So here's a portrait of Alphonse de Candolle. Okay, so he said that they originated in areas with the wild relatives growing in those areas. Okay, that was what he said in the 1880s. That really wasn't so long ago. That was about 150 years ago or something like that. Now another botanist, a Russian botanist and geneticist named Nikolai Vavilov, in 1916, he began a follow-up of De Candolle's work. Okay, and what he held to be true was that plants were domesticated, or Nikolai Vavilov did, that plants are domesticated where there's high genetic diversity occurring in the wild relatives. Okay, and he also showed that the majority of the domesticated plants came from mountain regions. Okay, so the majority of the domesticated plants came from mountain regions rather than river valleys, which are something that people assumed before. Okay, and according to Vavilov, there were 8 centers of diversity of cultivated plants. Okay, so Nikolai Vavilov actually was sort of like a hero. Okay, he was a very brave man. A lot of botanists of the time were very adventurous and very kind of strong and healthy. Okay, so he actually put forth ideas that the Soviet Union didn't like. Like he talked about the origin of cultivated plants, and he didn't put the Soviet Union in the center of the world in terms of the origin of cultivated plants. So he was sent to a gulag, a Soviet gulag, where he worked just like other people, and he was actually killed because the guards were harassing or beating up one of the prisoners, and he tried to interfere, and they killed him. Okay, so he was a very brave man. So many of the early botanists were very strong and also very, very daring. Okay, and so Vavilov was one of these. Okay, here's a picture of him. Okay, doesn't he look like a man that should be contended with? Yeah. Now another man named Jack Harlan. Okay, there's a picture of him. Okay, he's an American, let's see, here's American agricultural geneticist. Okay, he and his students at the Crop Evolution Laboratory at the University of Illinois actually did work with the same idea of origin of cultivated plants. Okay, but what he did is he actually negated Vavilov's idea of the 8 centers of diversity. Okay, and he actually associated crop origins with regions instead. Okay, and so that's something that most botanists sort of follow now. Okay, so one of the regions, so we're going to do a brief survey of plants from some of these different regions. So the Near Eastern region encompasses the Mediterranean area, Northern Europe, Turkey, the Balkans, Pakistan, and Iran. Okay, and here are some of the plants associated with this Near Eastern region. Okay, many of them familiar to us. Okay, barley, wheat, the garden pea, lentils, chickpeas, lupine, asparagus, beet, carrot, turnip, olive, cherry, plum, apricot, apple, pear, onion, garlic, cabbage, broccoli, lettuce, parsley, flax, clover, pistachio, digitalis from foxglove, belladonna, okay, opium poppy, and psyllium. And psyllium people sometimes used to kind of lend more bulk to their stool. Okay, so here's a look at some barley here to the left. In the center is some wheat, okay, and asparagus. So one of the things we need to remember is that the Near Eastern region has been held by many historians and anthropologists and botanists too as one of the main cradles of civilization, okay, where civilization began. Okay, now the Chinese region, okay, is the author of bamboo and peach, lychee, walnuts, persimmon, ginger, ginseng, gourds, camphor, tea, tung, soybean, buckwheat, horseradish, Chinese cabbage, and cucumber. So we're going to actually cover some of these plants that we're talking about that we're just kind of spouting at you, but be patient. Okay, we'll be actually covering some of these plants in our survey of the different families. Okay, so here's some bamboo. Here's some lychee, the flavor of summer in Hawaii, okay, along with mango. and Chinese cabbage. Okay, from the Chinese region. Now from the continent of Africa, we have yam, okay, sorghum, okra, the oil palm, the baobab, the sweet melons, coffee, cotton, and castor bean from the African continent. And now from South Asia and the Pacific Islands, okay, these include South Asia, yeah, Malaysia, Indonesia, Melanesia, the Philippines, and other Pacific Islands. There's a whole bunch of plants: sugarcane, eggplant, mango, banana, citrus fruits, safflower, nutmeg, clove, cardamom, turmeric, black pepper, jute, hemp, these are fiber plants, coconut or new, taro or kalo, rice, mung bean, sesame, betel nut, okay, which is used as a drug, a stimulant, and jackfruit, which actually is the largest of all the different tree fruits. Okay, so here's some sugarcane, an old picture of sugarcane. Okay, eggplant, nice looking fruit here. Because remember, anything with a seed in it is a fruit, even as if eggplant is sometimes considered to be like a vegetable. This is a mango tree, a nice tall mango tree. It's kind of hard to get the fruits, I think, of this one here. Banana plants, okay. Safflower. Here's some nutmeg fruits, and nutmeg fruits are the source of two different spices. One is called mace, M-A-C-E, and that's not the one that you spray people with, but it's used for baking, you know, like pastries or pies and things like that. And also nutmeg comes from the dried seed of this fruit. And here we have some taro or kalo, a plant very important to the Hawaiians locally. Now in North America isn't really the source of very many plants that have come into international use. But we have the sunflower, of course, sunflower seeds, cranberries, blueberries, and tobacco. Okay, so these are major plants coming out from North America to the rest of the world. Okay, I know there are some places in northern USA where you can actually go out to farms and pick your own blueberries and things like that, that people do that as an activity. That sounds like fun. Can you imagine trying to go out to somebody's house and pick your own mangoes? Okay. Now, Central and South America is a place of origin of corn, peanut, white potato, lima bean, common bean, cashew, pineapple, papaya, avocado, red pepper, tomato, cotton, cocaine, amaranth, quinoa, cacao, guava, sweet potato, pumpkin, squash, rubber, prickly pear, peyote, chayote, vanilla, sisal, and cassava. Okay, so here we have corn. Okay, the male inflorescence. Okay, here we have a peanut plant with the flower. The flower will actually, after it's been pollinated and fertilized, will actually tunnel into the ground and bear its fruits under the soil. Okay, this is cashew. Okay, kind of interesting fruits here. Okay, pineapple, quinoa, peyote, and cassava. Cassava, an extremely important starch source for many people in tropical areas. Okay, now we're going to go through some selected families of flowering plants. All right? So there are more than 300 families of flowering plants, and these families are right now undergoing reorganization. That's what they always do, reorganizing things on the basis of the DNA, chemical, and cladistical information. Okay? Now, classically, or the way most people have done it, is that the flowers and fruits and their characteristics are more reliable than the vegetative parts, such as the roots, the stems, and the leaves of the plants. So the flowers and fruits are the more conservative parts of a flowering plant. Okay, so the families, the flowering plant families, are distinguished mostly on the bases of flower and fruit parts and structures. Okay, so we're going to start off with the dicots. Okay, so we have the laurel family, or the Lauraceae. Okay, so you're going to have to be able to distinguish these different families from each other and be able to identify different kinds of plants that are in these families, you know, by their common names. Okay, so the laurel family, or the Lauraceae, have members that have primitive flowers, remember, that are radially symmetrical, and these primitive flowers don't have any petals. Okay, but the sepals are sometimes petal-like. Okay, and the stamens are in 3 or 4 whorls of 3 stamens each. Another thing that's interesting about the stamens of the laurel family is that the anthers are open up by flaps, or they lift up. Okay, that's actually a characteristic of the members of these families. So this family encompasses approximately about 1,000 species, and most of them are tropical evergreen shrubs and trees. Okay, many of them having aromatic leaves. Okay, here's a look at some member of the family, laurel. Okay, so the family name itself is from the laurel plant. Okay, Laurus nobilis. Okay, the leaves were used by the ancient Greeks, okay, to honor the victors of athletic events. They actually make like a head lay or a crown, and then so they were like for the original Olympics, okay, in Greece. Okay, then they were later used for academic honors conferred as well. Okay. Now cinnamon, okay, is another member of the laurel family. Okay, and the spice cinnamon is a pulverized or ground bark of a tree that's native to India and Sri Lanka. Okay. Now another plant called cassia is very similar, and often cassia is sold interchangeably with cinnamon. Okay, so both cassia and cinnamon have been used for thousands of years. Okay, for perfumes and anointing oils at the time of Moses. Okay, they were also used in Egypt 3,500 years ago, right? So this is actually one of the reasons for some of those voyages of discovery that actually happened in the 1400s, the 1500s, the 1600s, because the main inspiration for that was actually to reach the Spice Islands to get hold of the spices, because they wanted to actually bypass the Arab traders who made a big profit from importing spices into Europe. Okay, so one of the voyages of discovery, one of the instigations for that was actually spices, to get spices and riches for the people who invested in actually going out there to get them. Okay. Now camphor is another member of this family, okay, and has been also used since ancient times. Now camphor is native to the cooler areas of Asia, China, Japan, and Taiwan. Okay. And it's been used as a cold remedy, okay, in inhalants, in insecticides, and also in perfumes. So here you can see they're trying to distill this camphor, okay, because the essence of camphor comes from wood chips, okay. Another thing about camphor is that camphor trees are smog resistant. Okay, so some American cities have been using them for street trees, camphor trees. Okay. Now sassafras is a plant. Here's a look at it. Okay, that's native to the eastern United States and also to East Asia. It has this nice, spicy, aromatic wood. Okay. And sassafras has been used as a flavoring in toothpaste, chewing gum, mouthwashes, and soft drinks. Okay. And the flavor comes from distilling wood chips and bark, similar to camphor. Okay. So sassafras tea, here's a look at some sassafras tea. Doesn't that look good? Yeah. It's supposed to be a refreshing beverage. Okay. And sassafras was an ingredient in homemade root beers. Okay. In the past, sassafras was used by country doctors in the United States for hypertension, also in inducing sweats in people that have respiratory infections. Okay. And sassafras in large doses is a narcotic stimulant. Okay, but it's been reported as a carcinogen. Okay, or an agent that can cause mutations in cancer. Okay, so generally companies that make root beer don't actually use sassafras. Even the homemade root beer sometimes contains sassafras. Okay, now the sweet bay, know them as bay leaves. Okay, are used in gravies, of course, like in sauces, soups, meat dishes such as stews, savory dishes. And these are the leaves of laurel. So here's a look at a laurel plant along with its radially symmetric so-called primitive flower with many petals, not really differentiated into sepals. Okay, they don't really have sepals. Okay, all right. Now another member of this family, the laurel family, are avocados. Okay, avocados are very big, of course, nowadays. Their fruits are actually they have more calories by weight than red meats. Okay, here's a look at some avocado fruits just ripe for the picking. Okay, and so avocados are rich in plant fats. Okay, also they're rich in vitamins and iron. They're very nutritious, very healthy for people to eat if your digestive system can tolerate all the oils from avocados. Okay. Now the poppy family, okay, is known as the Papaveraceae. Okay, see how beautiful they are. Okay, so they're widely used as ornamentals. Okay, and most of them are herbs in temperate and subtropical areas. Okay, flowers have numerous stamens. Most of them have only a single pistil. Okay, and most have some kind of milky sap or some kind of colored sap that exudes from it if you cut the plant or break it. Okay, all of them produce alkaloid drugs. Okay, now the opium poppy has had significant impact on societies in the past and in the present. Think of China for one thing. Okay, opium was described by Dioscorides in the 1st century AD. Okay, also ancient Assyrians had medical texts that refer to opium and the opium poppies. Okay, so opium smoking was a major problem in China in the 1800s. It actually was one of the reasons for the opium wars there. Okay, so how do you actually get opium? You slash the green fruits or the green capsules of poppies, because poppies have capsules as fruits. Okay, and a thick white fluid oozes out when you slash the green fruits of poppies. Okay, and that white fluid, as it dries, is scraped off. It makes kind of like a brownish, sort of sticky, sort of exudate. Okay, so smoking and eating opium were ways that people actually took opium. You could smoke it or you could eat it. And there was actually a book called Confessions of an Opium Eater. Not only that, is that one of the great geniuses of American literature, Edgar Allan Poe, was known as an opium addict. Okay, I think he used to eat opium. Okay, He's actually somebody who invented the detective story, he invented the horror story, and he invented the short story. So he was a great genius, indeed. So many people are introduced to Poe when they're in their teens sometimes. You have the Cask of Amontillado and some other great short stories that he wrote. Okay, he was a real genius, and of course, his was like a romantic life plagued with many mysteries, especially surrounding his death. But he was an opium eater. Okay, so here's a look at the green fruit with a cut scored into it, and you can see this white milky exudate dripping out. Okay, so that's what opium is made from. Okay, now opium is also the source of two groups of drugs. Okay, the first group is narcotic and addictive. Okay, and these include morphine and codeine. Okay, here's an image of different doses of morphine. Morphine being a prima, a very primary painkiller, you know, for people who've been through surgery or have been wounded in battle. Okay, so morphine is still the best painkiller that we have. Okay, but generally hospitals and doctors don't like to prescribe morphine for very long because it's very addictive. Okay, and also let's see, so if you've undergone surgery, they may give you morphine for maybe 2 days, maybe 3 days, depending on what your pain level is, but they'll get you off morphine as fast as they can onto maybe some kind of oral medication instead of taking it intravenously, just because it's so addictive. Okay, now codeine is a cough suppressant. Okay, and codeine has some side effects, and one of the side effects of codeine, it is a really good cough suppressant and expectorant to help you kind of have productive coughs. But one of the bad things about codeine is it tends to bind you up in your intestines so that it can make you constipated. Okay. And the other of the kinds of group of drugs that we're talking about is neither narcotic or addictive. Okay, and these include papaverine and noscapine. Okay, so they're used for circulatory diseases, and noscapine is used as a codeine substitute. It doesn't have this codeine side effects that codeine has. Okay, now the drug known as heroin, okay, which is an illegal drug in the United States right now, is a derivative of morphine, all right? But it is 4 to 8 times more powerful as a painkiller as morphine, okay? Now, less than 100 years ago, heroin was marketed in the United States as a cough suppressant, if you can believe it, okay? Of course, heroin has had many devastating effects on people's lives, both in the United States and in other countries as well. And it's one of the major drugs smuggled into the United States. Okay. Actually, whole countries whose economies are run on heroin dealing. Okay. Anyway, so poppy seeds have almost no opium in them. Okay. And they're used as a garnish in baking. Look at this person eating some kind of cereal, maybe. Some kind of cereal or some kind of tart. Okay, with some opium seeds sprinkled in them. They're sort of like a bluish color. Yeah, sometimes you can get a roll or croissant or a bagel with opium seeds on them. Okay. So generally, poppy seeds have almost no opium. But there are reports that even if you eat just something with poppy seeds on it, if you take a urinary drug test, you can end up with a positive drug test. Okay? Now our local kind of poppy, the puakala, okay, or Hawaiian poppy, or Gemini glauca, okay, was used by Hawaiians as a painkiller, as a mild painkiller and analgesic. Okay? So this is a kala of the Midlands, the puakala. Okay. Now the next family we're going to talk about is the mustard family, okay, also known as the Brassicaceae. I think this is horseradish, okay, which is one of the members. They were also known as the cruciferæ before, because the 4 petals of the flower are in the shape of a cross. Crucifer, you know. Cruci means cross. Okay. So it has 4 sepals, 4 petals, 6 stamens, and 2 of these 6 stamens are shorter than the other 4. And all members of this family produce either calyx or silicles as fruits, and these are fruits that are unique to the Brassicaceae. Okay. Here's a look at a flower of a Brassicaceae member. You can see that the flowers have 4 petals in the shape of a cross. Hence their other name, cruciferæ. Okay. So there are about 2,500 species in this family, and they all produce a pungent, watery juice upon wounding. If you break off a stem or you bruise a leaf, it has this kind of pungent smell to it. Okay. So nearly all members of this family are herbs in temperate areas and cooler areas of the northern hemisphere, and they include things like cabbage, Chinese cabbage, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, broccoli, radish, kohlrabi, turnip, horseradish, watercress, and rutabaga. And of course, cabbage, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, broccoli, kohlrabi, and kale are all Brassica oleracea. We talked about that before. Okay, they're all variations on wild mustard. Okay. So watercress is kind of interesting in that it has many medicinal uses, as well as being a good source of, what is it? I think calcium, okay, for green. Okay, so in the 1st century AD, they actually had listed 40 medicinal uses of watercress, which is just a little parenthetical note that's interesting. Okay, here's some cabbage, here's some Chinese cabbage, cauliflower, which can be delicious, Brussels sprouts, same, just have to know how to cook them. Okay, broccoli, you can roast them sometimes, it's really good, roasted vegetables. We have a friend who roasts vegetables when she cooks for people, and it's just delicious, just wonderful. Okay, radish, kohlrabi, turnip, horseradish, watercress, and rutabaga. You can see some similarities in these different kinds of plants. Okay, now mustard is a mixture of dried and ground seeds of 2 species of brassica, okay, and canola oil, which also is sourced through the Brassicaceae. It's actually a hybrid plant, okay, and that's canola oil is a source of the HDL, which are heart-healthy fats, high-density lipoproteins. Okay, here's a look at mustard seeds and different kind of mustards and condiments produced from mustard. Is this a nice picture? Doesn't that make you feel hungry? Mustard is supposed to be very good for the digestion, kind of helps to stimulate gastric juices and saliva. Okay. Now the rose family, okay, also known as Rosaceae. Okay, so here's a rose family member. Okay, you see the many anthers, many stamens, multiple stamens. Okay, so there are more than 3,000 species in the rose family. Okay, they include trees, shrubs, and herbs. Okay, the flowers have the basal parts of the flowers fused into a cup. Okay, and the petals, sepals, and the numerous stamens are attached. So here's a rosa. You can see all the stamens here. You can see you have 5 petals here, so definitely a dicot. Okay. Now the rose family is divided into subfamilies. All right. First of all, you have one family that has inferior ovaries, or ovaries that are positioned lower then the attachment points of the rest of the flower, and they produce pomes. Okay, so here is a pome fruit, an apple. Okay, so here you can see the receptacle tissue from the floral parts, and here you have the inside parts that actually develop from the ovary with the seeds inside. Okay, and that's an example of a pome fruit. Okay. You have another type of subfamily that where you have a superior ovary or partly inferior ovary, and they produce either follicles, achenes, drupes, or clusters of drupelets. Okay, so here's a look at another rosa. Okay, with the hips, the fruit. There's all the different stages when it comes out in the spring, when they're budding, when they're flowering. Here, after pollination and fertilization, the fruits begin to develop, a green fruit and then a ripe fruit. Okay, nice progression there. Now the rose family also has stone fruits in them, cherries, apricots, peaches, and plums. Okay. And there's some cherries, apricots, peaches. Okay. Then you have the pome fruits, which include apples and pears. Don't they look delicious? Yeah. So both the stone fruits we mentioned and the pome fruits that we mentioned are generally fruits that come from temperate areas of the world. Okay. And then we also have aggregate fruits from the rose family: strawberries, blackberries, loganberries, and raspberries. Okay. Now the thing too is that roses are a favorite garden ornamental, of course, because of fragrance delights. Okay, it has an elegant fragrance to them, and they have been called the queen of the flowers, right? So in Bulgaria and neighboring areas, so here's a picture showing people picking roses in Bulgaria in the 1870s. A sobering reminder to us that many people during their whole lives work very hard, physical labor. Okay, so Bulgaria and the neighboring areas have a major perfume industry extracting otto of roses, okay, also known as otto of roses. Okay, so one of the interesting thing about this is that the perfume workers rarely have respiratory problems. So some people think that, you know, working with the essences of roses actually may have a way to kind of stop respiratory problems from happening in people who inhale the fragrance of roses. Okay. Okay, now the fruits of raw roses are rose hips, and here you can see some beautiful rose hips. Okay, they have a lot of vitamin C. They have up to 60 times the amount of vitamin C per unit volume of citrus fruits. Okay, so an interesting thing is that many Native Americans included rose hips in their regular diets. And another interesting thing is that scurvy, which comes about from a lack of vitamin C, it's a disease that comes about from a lack of vitamin C, was unknown among Native Americans. Okay. Now Europeans eat something called Nippon sopa when they have cold or flu. Okay, this is actually a look at that. Okay, it's actually a sweet and thick rose hips puree. Okay. Now, 500 Oneida tribespeople actually cured themselves of dysentery using blackberry root tea. Okay, this is way back when, a few hundred years ago. Okay. Now, the instructive thing is that many nearby white settlers who refused Indian cures died. Okay, they were too proud to allow the Native Americans to help them. Okay. Now, akala is a kala of the uplands, okay, and that's a Hawaiian raspberry. It was used for food, okay. It's rubus species, and the red-colored Hawaiian raspberry was used as a colorant for a rose-colored kapa or tapa, okay. Another rose family member in Hawaii is Ule, Osteomeles anthillidifolia. So it's one of the few rose family members that actually made it to Hawaii on its own. It's a native plant, okay? And you see that the stem is woody, okay, but the stem is also very flexible. So flexible that you could actually bend the stem around itself and actually make the mouth of scoop nets for catching freshwater fish. Okay, I think many women use those to catch freshwater fish, since many women in Hawaii had a lot of kapus on them, you know, right? So they would actually get the stem of the ule, bend it and twist it into a fishnet size, and they would put the netting that they would actually plait or make out of fiber, and then they could use them to scoop up fishes from freshwater streams. Okay, now the legume family. Okay, the legume family is also known as a Fabaceae. It's some beautiful flowers of a member of this family. Okay, they're also known as a leguminosae. Okay, so at approximately 13,000 species, this is the third largest family of angiosperms. Okay, you're looking at some fruits here, some legume fruits, okay? So the flowers can be either radial or bilateral. There are different types of legume flowers, okay? So the bilateral flowers have a keel, wing petals, and a banner petal. And the stamens are fused in a tube around the ovary. Here's a look at the banner petal, the wing petal, okay, the keel, okay, and here's the stamens, a few stamens, okay. So this is like the type that has that kind of flower, the bilateral flowers, okay. Now, of this family, the fruit of this family members are all legumes, okay. Remember, a legume is a dry fruit that splits along two seams when it's ready, okay, to disperse the seeds, okay. So the legume fruit is a common feature of this family. So it includes a lot of very important sources of nutrients for humans, including peas, beans, okay, like kidney beans, lima beans, garbanzo beans, broad beans, navy beans, tepary beans, soybeans, lentils, peanuts, alfalfa, sweet clover, jicama, licorice, and wattle. Okay. Now, wattle is an Australian tree, and it is a source of tannins that people use to tan leathers with. Okay. Okay, here's some peas, kidney beans, lima beans, garbanzo beans, soybeans, alfalfa, jicama, and golden wattle. Okay, some very nice images for us to look at. Okay, so they all belong to the same family, the Fabaceae. Now, carob was used as, and is used as, a substitute for chocolate, because unfortunately sometimes people get allergic to chocolate. You know, chocolate, of course, should never be given to dogs. They're poisonous to dogs. Okay, so carob is a chocolate substitute. Now, you also can get copols or hard resins from some members of this family. Okay, gum arabic, gum tragacanth, okay, to make mucilages, pastes, cloth printing, okay. So here's a insect in a sundew, or one of the carnivorous plants, just showing the mucilage. that can be very sticky. Okay. Now, hardwood, such as rosewood, is very much prized for furniture. Okay, and dyes, such as indigo, okay, which is more like a dark blue color. Logwood, which had been used to make to stain microscope slides, even though they're getting scarcer, so harder to find them. Woad waxen is a source of yellow dyes. Okay. Also, seeds of alfalfa and mung beans are used for sprouts, bean sprouts. Okay. So here we have some rosewood, some indigo, and here's some mung beans. Okay. For sprouts. Now the wing bean, which is a tropical bean, is very high in protein. Okay, not just that, is all parts of the wing bean are edible. Okay, so many of these different kinds of Fabaceae are edible, even though some are there are a few that are poisonous, like local weeds, lupines, black locusts, mescal beans. Okay, those are poisonous. Now locally we have the acacia koa, okay, koa, that people use for the va'a or the canoe. Okay. And the koa haole, which just means foreign koa, the Lucina leucocephala. Okay, it's a nitrogen fixing kind of plant, like many of the legumes are. Remember those little bumps on the roots that we saw, nitrogen fixing bacteria living in those little root nodules? Here you have a picture of wing bean. Here's a picture of koa with its phyllodes. And this is a photograph of koa haole. So one of the things you notice is that the inflorescence is very similar between these two. That's why the Hawaiians call Lucina leucocephala the koa haole. That just means the foreign koa. And this part of it here, this unblooming inflorescence, has been used for food by people. Okay, and Lucina leucocephala was actually brought into Hawaii as a feed for cattle and horses, because it could grow in dry areas and grow in areas that other plants couldn't do that well in. And of course, it started taking over Oahu and other islands, so they had to bring in a Lucina psyllid to actually control it. Okay. Okay, now the spurge family. Okay, also known as Euphorbiaceae. Okay, so these plants include the different kinds of Chamaesyces, euphorbias. Okay, very varied in what they look like. Okay, so stamens and pistils are in separate flowers. So this is looking at codium, which is also known as croton, okay, the staminate flowers. They often lack a corolla, and the flowers are usually inconspicuous. Okay, so true spurges have their female flower elevated on gynophores, and they're surrounded by male flowers. And the flowers on a cup with fused bracts. Okay, that's a kind of inflorescence known as a cyathium. Okay, so sometimes the flowers are surrounded by colored bracts, such as the poinsettias. Okay, but most of them have a milky latex, and some are poisonous. Okay, so the interesting thing is that many gardeners feel the urges to purge spurges, because some of them are very aggressive weeds. They reproduce really quickly. Okay. Now there's a estimated 100 million tons of cassava that are harvested every year in South America, Africa, and East Asia. So the roots of cassava are a staple in the tropics, and the cyanic poisons are removed by the boiling, fermenting, or squeezing out the juice. Okay. Now the power rubber tree is a source of crude rubber, and South America, of course, was the original source of rubber, but rubber trees have been planted in Indonesia and Africa, and they range in height from 16 to 164 feet tall, and the latex is in their inner bark, so they're scored, and the rubber drips out of them, and much of the rubber that is gotten from rubber trees are used in making automobile and aircraft tires. Okay, there's a look at some harvesting of rubber from a rubber tree. Okay, power rubber tree. Now castor oil comes from castor beans, and here's a look at the leaf of the castor plant, the castor bean plant. Okay, and these oils are used to make nylon and plastics and soaps. But the castor beans themselves are very poisonous. If a child eats one bean, sometimes it can actually kill the child. Okay. Another euphorbia is a crown of thorns, which is an ornamental. Okay. And it could be the plant that the crown of thorns of Christ was made from. Okay, so here's a look at some inflorescences. So this whole thing, these are bracts. Okay. This is an inflorescence of a female flower surrounded by male flowers. Okay. And so in Hawaii we have Chamaesyce species, and here's a weedy one, like a bane of gardeners. Okay. And another member of the spurge found in Hawaii is kukui, which is our state tree, Aloeru mollicana. Okay. So what we're going to do next is we're going to kind of go over on the side and take a look at some plant material and some things that are made from plants. Okay? Okay, here we are. All right. So we have a couple of spices. We have cinnamon. Okay. From the Lauraceae, so this could either be cinnamon or it could be cassia, but I like to use it making kabocha soup. I just put, coriander, turmeric, and a lot of cinnamon. Makes it very sweet. It's very delicious. Okay, and let's see, we have some here, some yellow split peas, which of course come from members of the Fabaceae. You can make split pea soup, okay, with this, whether you have the green split peas or the yellow split peas. And here we have a member of the Euphorbiaceae. This is not quite crown of thorns, but it's a relative. It's a euphorbia. Okay, you can see here the bracts with the inflorescence here in the center, with the female part way in the center, male flowers surrounding it. And so here's our example of a euphorbia. Okay? Okay, so we're going to go back to the computer. Okay, so that's all we have time for today, and we're going to continue with our survey of different plant families, okay, in the angiosperms. Okay, so until then, aloha.